Live from Dubai today, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Joanna Bersecci with your top stories. Stocks fall and oil hovers above $100 as the U.S. and Iran battle for control of the Strait of Hormuz. The White House says there's no deadline for Iran to submit a new peace proposal. The energy price shock is top of the agenda for EU leaders meeting in Cyprus after the bloc finally released a €90 billion loan for Ukraine. We're live in the country's capital. Plus, TSMC, the world's biggest chipmaker, says ASML's latest machines are too expensive, dealing a blow to Europe's most valuable company. And let's get you up to speed on some of these markets. First of all, the handover, I would say today, is not so pretty. We've got Asia Pacific down 0.6%, pulling back from some of the gains witnessed the first couple of days of trading of this week. European markets also seen opening up in negative territory, down 1%, and S&P futures also down 0.5% as well. This after scaling record highs once again for the S&P Nasdaq by the close yesterday. And then switching over, let's take a look at some of these key commodity indicators as well. We've got Brent scaling above triple-digit territory now. So we're back to $103. That is the handle, 1.1%. A lot of attention on what has been happening around the Strait of Hormuz and the fact that really essentially things are still locked, closed, and also dangerous for vessels looking to pass. European gas futures also up 2.5% as well today in trading. And the USD trading sideways, I would say. But of course, given the geopolitical uncertainty, we are seeing money go into the USD. As for our risk events today, this is what we're watching out for. We've got global flash PMIs coming up later around Europe and also in the U.S. So those numbers will start filtering through from 8:15 with French PMI data, then German PMI data, Eurozone PMI data to watch out for. As ever, we've got the weekly jobless claims in the U.S., a big focus, obviously, for the Fed, the reaction function, and for something for Kevin Warsh to think about as we think about the dynamics of the U.S. labor market. And then more earnings coming up, too. In the U.S., we've got Lockheed, American Airlines, and Intel. So those are your major risk events. With that, let's get started. Okay, we have had a slew of earnings drop in the first couple of minutes of this show. So let me just bring you some of the key figures. Let's start with ST Micro. And they are forecasting, they see a second quarter net revenue of $3.45 billion versus estimates of $3.19 billion. So that is a beat as far as ST Micro is concerned. And remember, we've had a lot of chips reports in the last 24 hours. It has been a stellar performing part of the market. Also, just to give you their ST Micro gross margin figure as well for the second quarter, 34.8 versus estimates of 34.5%. So a beat when it comes to ST Micro. Let's switch on as well because we've also got Roche coming up too, and the Roche figures from pharmaceutical perspective, first quarter sales come in at 14.72 billion versus estimates of 15.12 billion. So actually a bit of a miss versus expectations there. And you can see that over the course of the past year, up at 21%. And, today's numbers really show that there's a miss versus expectations, but they have actually confirmed their 2026 outlook. We will be speaking to the CEO, Thomas Schinecker. He will be on the opening trade at 7:30 a.m. London time. But the news doesn't stop there. We've also got Nokia crossing as well. First quarter adjusted operating profits coming in at 281 million versus estimates of 244.4 million. So a beat for Nokia. Nokia says it's assuming 5 to 9% Q-on-Q increase in net sales in the second quarter. And the second quarter operating profit to account for 12 to 16% of its full year profit. But a small beat coming through from Nokia as well for their first quarter sales. And then finally, let's move on to beverages. Heineken. Heineken figures first quarter organic beer volume has actually dropped. It is down 0.8% versus estimates of 0.7%. So a bit of a drop that we're seeing for the spirits maker. And just to give you a little bit more commentary around some of the other earnings that have come through as well, they still see full year adjusting operating profit growth of 2 to 6%. And the overall net revenue number is 6.7 billion versus 6.67 billion. Sticking to consumer goods, the final one I want to bring you is Nestle. Nestle, first quarter organic revenue, 3.5% versus 2.64%. That must be the growth figure. To be clear, for Nestle, in terms of the sales figure, first quarter sales has come in at 21.32 billion. They are maintaining their guidance for 2026. They still see full year organic revenue growth of 3 to 4%. The estimate is 3.22, so the growth outlook is in line. And they've started a process with potential buyers for vitamins. So that is your roundup of a whole bunch of earnings that we just got at the top of this show. With that, let's see how Asian markets are faring with Min Min Lo in Hong Kong. The handover not so pretty today, Min Min.
Hey, Jomana. Yes, it has been a busy earnings season, right? You were just wrapping up the European earnings. We woke up this morning just digesting the earnings from the US overnight as well, from Boeing, from Tesla, and all of these pointing to a very resilient economy in the US. And then we move over to the Asia session. We have SK Hynix reporting also blowout earnings, 5-fold increase in net income. Really a record when it comes to net income and revenue. And that's why you see the MXAP there early this morning, big pop. We had at one point Japan, Taiwan, Korea all hitting record highs. But then over the next few hours, you start to see that unwinding, right? Because we saw the pop in oil prices, and that was enough to spook investors. You take a look at these regional benchmarks, all starting to turn red. Kospi, though, flipping back in the green just slightly here. It's been a pretty volatile session overall, and it seems like some of those uncertainties over the Strait of Hormuz and the gunfire that we have been seeing over the past 24 hours or so, that is still an overhang in markets right now. You take a look at some of the chip stocks that we are watching, because that has emerged as an important theme, right? The tech dispersion in Asia. And yes, I was speaking about SK Hynix, and yes, you're still seeing it down by 0.4% despite the very strong earnings. And again, bear in mind, we saw a very wide trading range already today, intraday. Earlier it was in the green, now it's in the red. But the other names, Samsung, TSMC, is still seeing some decent gains here. Kioxia just moderately in the green here. But overall, we are still seeing that supply tightness, right? Especially when it comes to the NAND and the DRAM memory chips. SK Hynix was able to hike prices, very strong margins that we saw there.
Yeah, and interesting, SK Hynix, they've managed to report a 5-fold increase in profit. Just really impressive numbers there. Min Min Lo in Hong Kong, thank you so much. Well, turning to the Middle East conflict now, and the price of oil rose for a fourth day as the US and Iran remain locked in a standoff over the Strait of Hormuz after failing to meet for a fresh round of peace talks. Iranian gunboats have fired on commercial ships in the key waterway, with a cargo ship and a container vessel coming under attack. The U.S. also intercepted 2 of Iran's oil tankers and has a third vessel under escort in the Indian Ocean. Washington, for its part, says it's leaving lines open to hear a peace proposal from Iran.
The president has not set a deadline himself. Ultimately, he will dictate the timetable. And again, he is satisfied with the naval blockade, and he understands that Iran is in a very weak position, and the cards are in President Trump's hands right now.
For more, let's bring in Bloomberg Managing Editor for MENA Economy and Government, Paul Wallace. Paul, so we're in the state of a ceasefire. It seems to be an indefinite ceasefire, but at the same time, the U.S. is saying that they would like to get a response from Tehran on a peace proposal. I mean, where do things stand now as it pertains to the potential for diplomatic discussions?
So I think what we've heard from Caroline Levitt, and she's kind of spelled out that as far as the U.S. is concerned, the ball is in Iran's court. It wants to hear, as you said, a peace proposal from them. Presumably that would, if it was to the U.S.'s liking, that would then lead to a second round of talks in Pakistan, in the capital there of Islamabad, or perhaps another venue. But that's the sequence that we're expecting. Interestingly, Levitt did also say that Trump was particularly interested in Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, and he wants that handed over to the Americans or another country. So she specified that that was something he wants Iran to agree to. Now, we don't know if they can't even go to talks before Iran's agreed to hand over that HEU or the highly enriched uranium, or if that, if they just need to give a hint that it's on the table and they can discuss it in Pakistan.
So much of the focus now, I would say, the battlefield is being played out around the Strait of Hormuz. There were multiple incidents yesterday, vessels being seized, attacked on. Just walk us through the latest there.
Exactly. I mean, we've got now what could be called a double blockade. You've obviously got Iran effectively closing the strait to almost all international ships. And now you've got this U.S. blockade in a place that's now about 10 days in. It's a blockade of Iranian ports. And the U.S. is saying this is working. It's really, really choking the Iranian economy. Trump keeps quoting this figure, saying that Iran is losing $500 million a day. That's a very disputable figure, but whatever. The fact is, it is hurting Iran, even if some ships are getting, including oil tankers, are getting through that U.S. blockade.
Yeah.
And perhaps that pressure is why we've seen Iran seize 2 ships in the last day and fire upon some. But that double blockade is a reason that a lot of people think this ceasefire cannot be strung along for weeks and weeks. There's pain on both sides. The Americans because of what's happening with global energy prices, and the Iranians because of this U.S. blockade of Iranian ports. So something is probably going to have to give in the coming days, or in not much longer than a week.
Essentially, it is a straight standoff. Bloomberg's managing editor for MENA Economy and Government, Paul Wallace. U.S. futures are in negative territory after the S&P hit a record yesterday. Let's bring in Bloomberg MLive strategist Mark Cranfield. So today, a bit of an exception, but overall, Mark, these markets keep going from strength to strength.
It's been a tremendous run for equities in particular this month. If you look across at the MSCI World Index, we're up more than 8% for the month, which is pretty dramatic by any standards at all. And we were talking about S&P 500. I think it's posting its best month for about 6 years, something like that. So really very impressive numbers across equity markets. And we've had some of the biggest gains in Asia as well, with Taiwanese and Korean stocks right at the forefront. But a bit of a setback today, and that's mostly to do with the rise in oil prices. We had a sudden jump higher in oil prices. There was a lot of talk, it was coming from social media, saying there was action again on the military front in the Middle East. It turns out that probably wasn't true, and yet the rise in oil prices did enough to spook people to make them suddenly become very negative. But you often get that when markets have been doing extremely well, when people have got a lot of money on the table, particularly in stock markets, they're willing to dial back slightly when they get a trigger. In this case, it's once again the oil prices. So certainly that's made people a little bit defensive in the near term. It may not last all that long, because the underlying story at the moment is that people are very focused on demand for AI products. There is some concern about CapEx. As you were talking about SK Hynix there, Taiwan Semiconductor, their profitability has been extremely good, but they're also talking about spending a lot more money in the months ahead. And that is a bit of a concern to investors, whether it's justified or not. We've seen it in the past. Towards the end of last year, markets came back when investors thought that CapEx spending was running too fast ahead of the revenues that were being produced. So we're seeing a bit of back and forth in that front. It may well blow over, particularly if the US companies continue to post big numbers and set a good tone for global markets. But as of today, we're back to looking at oil prices. They're above $100, as you said. And for the moment, people are being a little bit defensive.
Yeah, makes sense. Bloomberg MLive strategist Mark Cranfield, thank you so much. Well, still ahead, Tesla plans to ramp up capital expenditure this year to $25 billion to support Elon Musk's push into AI and robotics. But first, ASML's U.S.-listed stock falls after its biggest customer delays deploying the company's latest chip-making gear. More on that story next. This is Bloomberg. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing has decided to delay using ASML's newest, most advanced chip-making machines until at least 2029 to save money. TSMC's decision may not bode well for ASML, with its U.S.-traded shares falling as much as 5.5% after the announcement. Neil Campling, Bloomberg's senior strategist, joins us now. Well, Neil, this is obviously not good news for ASML. What are the implications for the company?
Good morning. I think the main thing is that TSMC had said a year ago that they were potentially delaying using the technology from ASML called High NA, which was due for potentially for mass production 29 to 2030. Intel have decided to take this particular technology, but these machines are even nearly 100% more expensive than the existing equipment per machine, up to more than $400 million per machine. It's a very, very high product set, and so it is something where perhaps TSMC are looking to try and negotiate price, because there's literally no one else who's making these kind of leading edge machines. So whether it's a bargaining tool remains to be seen. Clearly, in the meantime, there is enormous demand for AI related chips. But with the SOX index, the semiconductor index, going up for a record 16 days in a row, this is the first piece really of negative news we've had in the sector for quite some time.
Yeah, most definitely. And you say potentially it could be a negotiating tactic. And you mentioned that there are little substitutes for what ASML have to offer. So how do TSMC cope in the meantime until 2029 if they actually do follow through on this?
They have been sort of developing some internal technology. So it is possibility that they are seeing some good improvements in the labs in terms of their internal solutions. But in terms of the industry specific, there's really nothing else that comes close to the production capabilities of the ASML toolset. So whether TSM are able to create that internal solution to be ready in time remains to be seen. We've seen other companies try alternatives, primarily because of the high cost of these products. But so far, every time we've seen these, we've seen companies come back to the ASML solutions, such as what I mentioned earlier, Intel have chosen those high NA machines. So it's going to be a fascinating watch to see whether TSM can create an internal solution or whether they'll come back to that bargaining table with ASML on the pricing.
Yeah, as you say, the first bit of slightly negative news that we get in this space over the course of the last few weeks. Neil Campling, Bloomberg senior strategist, thank you so much for the reporting there. Well, coming up, Tesla looks to spend billions to transform the company into an AI and robotics company. We'll have more on CEO Elon Musk's plans next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Tesla plans to spend more than $25 billion this year to pivot from electric vehicles towards AI and robotics. CEO Elon Musk told analysts the massive investment is necessary to keep pace with big tech, and he believes that the gamble will eventually yield results.
I think you've seen most, if not all, certainly the major technology companies substantially increasing their capital investments, and we're going to be doing the same. I think it's going to pay off in a very big way.
Our aviation and transport reporter Danny Lee is with us. So $25 billion, that is a huge sum. How is the investment going to be deployed?
Yeah, well, for Elon Musk, he's joining this kind of spending parade we've seen from a whole host of manufacturers. And in fact, that $25 billion, it's almost 3 times more than Tesla spent on CapEx in the previous year in 2025. And between 2023 and 2025, it's $25 billion is almost more than that in the 3 years. So it's a big chunk of change and really going towards that robotics and AI spending drive that Elon Musk has to reach his vision of allowing Tesla to transition from just a EV company, an automotive business, into something so much more holistic and more advanced. And so therefore, he needs to spend that money quite quickly, and particularly this year, in order to start accelerating some of those plans and to make sure he can realize them in the long run, in order to just ultimately to stay competitive.
Yeah. And Danny, one of the other announcements that is catching people's eyes is they have announced that they're going to spend $3 billion on a research chip factory in Texas. What do we know about that?
Yeah, this research chip factory is kind of a drop in the ocean. The start of what Elon Musk wants is to build this kind of full-scale advanced manufacturing. It's very much still an ambition, but that $3 billion is just the start. Typically, major mainstream companies like TSMC would spend in the region of 10 times of that amount. So it's the start of what then Elon Musk can start producing, or at least Tesla can start producing these thousands of chip wafers a month to help feed into research projects and other designs. And so therefore, this kind of effort, this initiative is being led by SpaceX and with the help of the likes of Intel. And so this will help start to try and realize some of its major goals in this space. But of course, it has to still move the likes of TSMC off the top of the charts here.
Yeah. Oh, well, so they got their work cut out for them. Danny Lee, thank you so much. All right, now to some of the other top stories we're following this morning. Tencent and Alibaba are reported to be in discussions to invest in DeepSeek. The tech news outlet, The Information, says the deals would value the Chinese AI startup above $20 billion. DeepSeek made headlines in January last year when it released its breakthrough AI model. And SoftBank is said to be seeking a $10 billion margin loan backed by its shares in OpenAI as it looks to intensify its AI push. Sources say the 2-year loan would carry an option for SoftBank to extend the borrowing by an additional year. Founder Masayoshi Son has been piling on debt as he positions himself as a linchpin in the global AI boom with large-scale investments in OpenAI. Switzerland's government is pressing ahead with plans that could force UBS to hold billions more in capital, escalating a standoff with the bank over regulatory reform. Burns says it will submit a bill requiring full capital backing for UBS's foreign units while scaling back some other earlier proposals. It says the overall changes require about $20 billion in additional capital at the bank's Swiss unit. UBS says it strongly disagrees with the package, warning it could have far-reaching consequences for the Swiss economy. And European car sales jumped the most in nearly 2 years in March, driven by strong growth in fully electric and hybrid models. New vehicle registrations climbed 11% to 1.58 million last month, with sales expanding in all major markets. EV deliveries soared by 42%. So strong figures coming through on car registrations. This is your markets as we head into the open. Of course, a lot of focus still on commodities. Brent back up above $100, 103 is where we're at, 1.4%. It is a showdown on the Strait of Hormuz, as we've been talking about multiple incidents occurring there in the last 24 hours. The USD seeing a bit of love this morning, up about 6 basis points. And then as we head into another big day for U.S. and U.S. earnings, S&P futures are down 0.6%. And coming up, as I was just referring to, the U.S. and Iran locked in a state of standoff over the Strait of Hormuz, with the focus now on what can be done here to break the deadlock. We'll speak with former U.S. State Department Senior Advisor Negah Angha. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Live from Dubai today, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Jumana Versace with your top stories. Stocks fall and oil hovers above $100 as the U.S. and Iran battle for control of the Strait of Hormuz. The White House says there's no deadline for Iran to submit a new peace proposal. The energy price shock is top of the agenda for EU leaders meeting in Cyprus after the bloc finally released a €90 billion loan for Ukraine. We are live in the country's capital. Plus, TSMC, the world's biggest chip maker, says the ASML's latest machines are too expensive, dealing a blow to Europe's most valuable company. Let's get you up to speed on equity indices as we head into the open. And today we're seeing a little bit of cautiousness come through. The handover from Asia, as you can see, mostly negative, down 0.7%. European markets also looking like they're going to open down 1% or 0.9% here. Keeping a close eye on the PMI data that's coming later this morning as well, in addition to all the earnings that have been dropping over the course of the first half hour of this show. And then S&P futures also down 0.5%, though of note, both the S&P and NASDAQ once again closed at an all-time record high in yesterday's trade. So a bit of cautiousness this morning as we keep a close eye on developments in the region as it pertains to the Strait of Hormuz. Switching over, Brent this morning back up above triple digits. So we are trading at around 103 here, 1.3% higher in the session, about $1 higher. Breaking through $100 to the upside. And of course, traders are on high alert because there have been several incidents of ships being seized upon, incidents of attacks. And none of this bodes well for the free and safe passage of vessels going through the strait. So that's having an impact also on gas futures today, up 2.6% as well. And then the USD trading sideways with a little bit of a bid, up 5 basis points. Now, time for your front page news. Les Echos leading with the Iran-US stalemate, saying President Trump's ultimatums are causing a stir. And the Wall Street Journal also focusing on the crippling limbo between war and peace in Iran that leaves the Strait of Hormuz closed and the prospect of escalation looming. And then the FT reports that Tesla has boosted its spending plans to $25 billion this year as CEO Elon Musk announced a substantial increase in investment for self-driving taxis, trucks, robots, and a massive new chip factory to power its AI ambitions. And you can get a roundup of the stories you need to know to get your day going. In today's edition of Daybreak, Terminal subscribers can go to DAYB Go. All right, let's continue with earnings. We have more earnings dropping. Sanofi from the pharma space. So first quarter business EPS has come in a beat, 1.88 euros versus estimates of 1.78. They are also affirming their guidance for the year. In terms of first quarter sales, also a beat, 10.51 billion versus estimates of 10.24 billion as well. And then first quarter sales at constant FX up 13.6%. So a beat coming through from Sanofi. We also have some earnings coming through from Saab as well. And interesting to hear commentary. The CEO says market conditions continue to be favorable, but let's bring you the figures. First quarter business EPS, first quarter sales at 19.16 billion Swedish krona versus estimates of 19.63 billion Swedish krona. So a bit of a miss on first quarter sales. As it pertains to operating profits, we have 1.92 billion Swedish krona versus estimates of 1.72 billion. So it is a miss on sales, but when it comes to bottom line, it is a beat. And as I was just saying, the commentary, the CEO says the market continues to be favorable in terms of their first quarter orders. They have orders of 18.24 billion. So that is the latest from Saab. Now, the U.S. and Iran remain locked in a standoff over the Strait of Hormuz, with both sides effectively choking off traffic during an extended fragile ceasefire. Joining me now is Negah Angha, a visiting fellow at King's College London and former senior advisor at the U.S. Department of State and National Security Council under the Biden administration. Really good to have you with us to share your perspectives. How do you break the deadlock around the Strait of Hormuz right now?
Good morning, and thanks for having me on. Look, I think right now we're at a political impasse and strategic impasse in the conflict. I think the Pakistani negotiators, mediators right now are trying to bring both sides to the table. I think we need to be realistic that we won't necessarily find a comprehensive agreement that we were hoping for across the globe. But I think what we do have potentially is a very very narrow political framework that both sides can hopefully agree to. What it'll require is both sides coming to the table again for conversations. They'll have to focus on sort of short-term, near-term deliverables, and that could be sort of a discussion of a future discussion on the nuclear file, some sort of economic or sanctions relief, and a discussion on stockpiles, and just essentially bringing a bit of a pause to the situation. And I think that would be the most realistic next step over the coming weeks.
Okay, but in order to get back to the negotiating table, the Iranian side are saying they would need the U.S. to lift the blockade. Do you see the U.S. caving on that? Do you see them temporarily lifting the naval blockade in order to incentivize the Iranians back to the table?
I think there could be a potential if, there are the right assurances, the right signals coming from Iran. I think Iran right now is essentially running the clock as much as they can with the United States. They know that the United States right now is under pressure to want to exit from this conflict. The U.S. midterm elections are around the corner, so this is important. But I think it's going to be important to see what kind of reactions will come from the Iranians. There's a lot of back-channel conversations happening right now. And if the situation presents itself, I do think you'll have the blockade lifted if the Iranians come to the table.
And in one of his Truth Social posts, actually the one where President Trump announced the new extended timeline for the ceasefire, he also spoke about fractured Iranian leadership. What do we understand is the situation today amongst key decision-making individuals at the top of the Iranian regime? Because there seems to be a split between those who are opting for a more pragmatic route versus the hardliners, the IRGC, who are okay with extending the timeline of this conflict.
I think there's definitely a splinter between the different factions. We're aware of that. I think we all assume that there would be some fractures within the system. And of course, the Khamenei is not necessarily the supreme leader. He's acting more like a leader. He hasn't been, the front face of these negotiations. I think there's been a lot of conversations that are taking place in Tehran trying to figure out a solution. Again, Iran has been at this game for 47 years, so they're going to want to run the clock. I think there's an inherent concern within Iran of how long they can run the clock. The reality is they probably have another 2-3 months of playing this game, and I think those are the inherent debates that are happening within the political leadership right now in Tehran.
Now, we also today have got another round of talks taking place at ambassadorial level between Lebanon and Israel. And there has been a big push out of the U.S. administration to separate the two fronts so that the Lebanese government, on behalf of the Lebanese state, are having discussions with Israel on a separate track to Iran. How successful do you think they're going to be at separating the two issues?
I think both issues are parallel yet interlinked. It is something that Iran is going to continue to stay focused on, and they're going to use it as part of their carrot and stick sort of process in terms of the negotiations. Iran is still heavily reliant on its proxies in the region. It can't let go of their proxy in Lebanon at this moment in time. It will set a bad precedent in terms and feelings with the other proxies in the region. So I think the United States is going to try very hard to keep it separate but parallel, but the Iranians are going to continue to use it as part and parcel of the U.S.-Iran negotiations.
Yeah, I mean, if the outcome of this war is that you still have some of the key figures of the Iranian regime still in place, i.e. the regime has survived, How does that complicate the Lebanese government's efforts to disarm Hezbollah? And in another sense, let me reframe the question. How closely linked is the fate of Lebanon, of Hezbollah disarmament, to the future of the Iranian regime?
I think they're interlinked. I think, again, these are proxies that have learned for decades now to be able to work together and to stay cinched at the waist. So you'll see it being part and parcel. If one, if the Iranian regime falls, I think you will see the Hezbollah falling as well. Their main source of income and support comes from the IRGC. So they're interlinked, and I think this is the issue that as many Middle East watchers sort of articulate, it's a bit of a 4D chess game in the Middle East. If you move one piece, it has repercussions not just in one or two countries or boxes. It has a repercussion across the region because of these interlinking relationships, given the nature of the Middle East over the last few decades.
Negah, really good to chat to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Negah Angha, visiting fellow at King's College London. The U.S. Navy Secretary John Phelan has been fired after infighting with top leaders at the Pentagon. Sources say he was forced out after clashing with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and his deputy over President Trump's plans for so-called U.S. Golden Fleet of new ships. Phelan's dismissal follows the departure of the Army Chief of Staff earlier this month. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says several Persian Gulf and Asian allies have requested currency swap lines amid pressure from the war in Iran. Traditionally set up between central banks, swap lines allow one nation to deploy the currency of another to address liquidity demands in that other currency.
Many of our Gulf allies have requested swap lines. You would have just read about the UAE, and swap lines, whether it's from the Federal Reserve or the Treasury, are to maintain order in the dollar funding markets and to prevent the sale of the U.S. assets in a disorderly way.
EU leaders are meeting in Cyprus amid mounting economic pressures from the Iran conflict, with the oil and gas price spike already costing the bloc 22 billion euros. Ukraine has also returned to the forefront of the agenda after Hungary lifted its veto on Brussels' 90 billion euro loan to Kyiv. Bloomberg's chief Europe correspondent Oliver Crook is on location in Nicosia. Ollie, good to have you with us. So how is the EU looking to tackle the energy price shock from the Iran conflict?
I think for EU leaders, it's a matter of sort of impressing the worry that they have over the energy shock across Europe without really inspiring panic. And we've seen evidence of that already, Jumana, in the CPI and inflation data. We've seen it increasingly now in the GDP data. You saw for this morning, the Germans putting out their forecast and cutting their expectations for growth by half. And that is something that now is going to be a very present concern for European leaders. The question is, how do they address that energy shock in a collective manner? You've had a number of different measures that have been deployed over 20 countries within the European Union, 120 measures. It's cost those governments about 9 billion euros. How do you go forward sustainably if this is going to be a protracted crisis for the Europeans and for their gas and jet fuel supply? So one of the things that the EU can do and sort of coordinate those gas storage conversations among those member states, also about basically getting that jet fuel to each respective nations. There's always a concern within the European Union that, for example, a big country like Germany can pay a lot of money to get those sort of supplies, while other ones may not be able to. So it's a lot of coordination. The EU is also looking at suspending state aid rules throughout this crisis in order to make sure to make things easier for those companies and for those consumers. And there's, of course, that longer term push, Jumana, which the EU will use to say that this is all about electrification in the long term, no matter where your gas is coming from, whether it's Russia, whether it's the Gulf, and increasingly also concerns about the United States. You're not safe until you're energy autonomous, and that is going to be one of their big pushes to try to get that energy independence through electricity and electrification.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the energy linkage on back of the war in Iran. But then also, other major developments, you were covering the Hungarian election a couple of weeks ago, and it seems that there is a breakthrough now in terms of releasing this loan, this long-anticipated loan to Kyiv. How significant is it going to be?
Yeah, it is significant, Jumana. I think this is basically viewed by the Ukrainians, and Zelensky has told us this in the past, that this is basically life or death for them, this 90 billion euro loan. And it looks like it has now been approved and that it will be able to move forward. That being said, we've had a couple of false dawns on this, so we'll just wait till the final moment to make sure that that does get paid out. And then the question is, when does that first tranche come out and get paid to the Ukrainians? They really needed the money by April. They have been saying they've managed to get a little bit of stopgap funding, but this is really for Zelensky a matter of survival. And he will be arriving a little bit later in Cyprus to discuss this with other European leaders. But it appears that that 90 billion euro loan will now move forward. What the sort of post-Orban regime within Hungary and within the European Union, however, it does create another set of opportunities. And we're going to have a lot more conversations, Jumana, about the Ukrainians joining the European Union, potentially in a more accelerated timeline, now that Viktor Orban is out.
Yeah. Bloomberg's chief Europe correspondent Oliver Crook in Nicosia. Thank you so much. Well, tomorrow we'll bring you a trio of big interviews from the sidelines of the EU leaders meeting. We'll be speaking with the heads of state of Estonia, Lithuania, and Romania. And coming up, European PMIs due later today amid a backdrop of war-driven uncertainty. We'll have the preview next. This is Bloomberg. We'll be getting April's PMI readings for the euro area and the UK later this morning. The data is set to shed more light on the economic fallout from the Iran war-driven energy price surge at the start of the second quarter. Joining me now is Zoe Steinweiss, who leads Bloomberg's coverage of Western Europe economies. So I'm guessing the numbers are not going to be that pretty. How bad are they going to be?
Yes, that's we're bearing for the worst today. The first month we had, the numbers already were quite downbeat. Now the question is, how far will this carry on in the second month? The French numbers are supposed to be quite horrible, all under that 50 level. 50, remember, in PMI speech means that it's contraction. Above 50 means that it's growth. So the French numbers due in about an hour and a half are all predicted to be in that below that 50 level. The Germany numbers and the euro area numbers are seen above 50. The thing is, the euro area composite number is seen at just 50.1. So that's really quite borderline. So we're slightly worried, especially because thinking of last week I went to the IMF in DC, and there the IMF downgraded all of the euro numbers quite drastically, the UK number as well. So if that's anything to see, and then Ollie already mentioned just now, Germany downgraded its growth forecast for this year as well. So really, it could be quite bad today.
Yeah, okay, so let's see what happens when the figures come out very soon. Ollie was talking about the sort of EU-wide response or the formulation of a response to this energy shock. When you think about individual countries, and what options do policymakers actually have here, given that there isn't a lot of fiscal leeway for many of them?
That's right. They are quite restricted there. We know that that governments have actually put in measures to support people on energy. Here in Germany, they've introduced that at filling stations, the price of gas only can be changed once a day. Things like that can be done. Again, the fiscal constraints are an issue, and overall, there's those lines, and that's something that will be coming up today. It's what Christine Lagarde calls temporary, targeted and tailored. They did policymakers did find that during the pandemic, measures that were introduced to support households and companies weren't any of those. So now they are pushing very strongly for that, and governments just have become a lot more careful. They know that there only is so much they can do, and so it does seem like households will have to swallow some of that pain.
Zoe, always good to chat to you. Zoe Steinweiss, who leads Bloomberg's coverage of Western Europe economies. Now, plenty more coming up. This is Bloomberg.
conflict will end, I think gasoline prices will come back to where they were or perhaps lower. As they did, President Trump has shown that he is good at getting energy prices down.
That was U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent talking about that eventually energy prices will come down. And we spent a lot of the last couple of days analyzing where energy prices are. I also just want to flag to you that it's not just the energy space, agriculture as well. Take a look at this. Agricultural commodities have hit a one-year high, and a lot of that has happened into and around the start of the Iranian war. And so it's not just energy, but also other products as well that are getting hit by some of the price shocks. So bear that in mind. The other chart that I want to show you is we've been talking about the strength in equity markets, the fact that S&P and NASDAQ have hit these record closes. And equally, what you've started to see the last week, or at least since the ceasefire was implemented in the region, is spreads have started to come down as well. These are credit spreads. So this is high yields and investment grade spreads also tightening too. So credit spreads are telling you a similar story to U.S. equities, and that they're looking past some of the geopolitical developments in the region and focused on, I guess, more solid earnings and some of the micro stories. Then speaking of micro stories, the other chart that I wanted to flag to you is just the auto space and the fact that it really has been a very challenging year. The Iran war has certainly put a lot more downward pressure on cars, on the auto industry, both in Asia and in Europe. But I will say this morning, we did get car registrations, and they actually showed the strongest jump in 2 years. So perhaps a sign that things are beginning to turn. Now, to access, search, and save all of the Bloomberg Terminal charts used on this show and across Bloomberg Television, Terminal subscribers can use the function CHRT TV Go if you want to look at these in more detail. And in terms of what you want to watch out for today, we've got the global flash PMIs coming up for April. That includes the individual European nations as well as Eurozone as a whole. So those are going to start coming through in the next couple of hours or so. 1:30 p.m., weekly jobless claims as ever in the U.S. And then we've got earnings. Lockheed, American Airlines, Intel to continue the deck of earnings that have been coming through from the U.S. And a reminder of the earnings interviews coming up as well in Europe. Stay with us for conversations with the CEOs of Roche and Saab. And don't forget our monthly show, Next Africa, airs tonight as well.